Hey, if you liked the band Accept or were into some of the more real heavy stuff back in the 80s, I think you'll have fun with this video. I love doing these types of videos on this channel because the reality of it is the people that follow this channel, a lot of the people that watch these videos are a little bit more sophisticated in the sense that you know a lot of the history and I can bring up these kind of slightly more obscure bands and things like this, and we get all this response from people like, I remember that album, you know, and then I start learning things from all the comments that people make on these things. It's actually really, really cool. But see if you remember this one. So I must have been, 14 years old. I was walking home from school, and every day I'd walk home from school, there was, you'd see all the same kids kind of all walking in the same direction, headed to the neighborhood. And I remember there was this one kid that I would see on a fairly regular basis. And for some reason, one of these times when we were walking home, we ended up kind of walking close to each other. And I don't remember how it happened, but we just started talking. And as we're talking, I find out that he's really into like hard rock music, heavy music. And so we connect because, you know, I'm 14 years old or so, and I'm really starting to get into Iron Maiden and Motley Crue and some, you know, the stuff, the metal stuff that was happening in the early 80s. And he says, hey, come over to my house. I have some stuff that I think you might like. So I go over to this guy's house and I walk into his room, and the first thing I see is a poster of plastic surgery disasters by the Dead Kennedys. and that instantly tells you what you're in for with this guy, right? And so anyway, he breaks out this record, and I'll show you what record he busted out. This, Accept, Restless and Wild. And if you're not familiar with this record, you should be, especially if you like hard rock, heavy metal music, because this was, so he says, you got to check this out. And he takes this thing and he puts it on the turntable, and he puts the needle down. And if you've never heard the song, the first song is called Fast as a Shark. And he puts the needle down, and the recording, the song itself, the beginning of the song is actually a recording of a record, if you follow me. So in other words, when you're listening to it on the record, you're actually listening to what sounds like somebody putting on a little 78 RPM. And it's this little folk song in German. Heidi, Heido, Heida, Heidi. And it just goes like that. And it just, this little sing-songy thing, and I'm sitting there and he's got it cranked up really loud. I don't know what I'm in for. And then all of a sudden, as you're hearing this little funny German folk song, all of a sudden you hear the needle scratch. And if you used to listen to vinyl, or if you still do, you know the sound of a needle that gets bumped and it's like getting pushed across the grooves, that buzzy, grindy sound. I don't know how you would even describe it. Just very unique sound. So in the recording, you hear this little folk song, then you hear the needle scratch, and then you hear the most blood-curdling, crazy, wild, animal, loud, heavy metal sound you've ever heard in your life, at least for me at that point. And it's Udo Dirkschneider, the singer for Accept, just scream. And then while he's screaming, all of a sudden, this crazy, crazy fast song starts. And it's called Fast as a Shark. And it just... And he's got this thing cranked up, and I'm sitting in this room with this guy. I'd never heard anything like this before. And it is just blaring out of these speakers. And I'm just thinking, this is one of the coolest things I've ever heard in my life. And you're listening to, you know, Udo Dirkschneider, that the voice that he's got, that is just one of the most, I mean, it's the kind of thing that would just take paint off of walls. It's so crazy listening to this guy. And it just, and this song just starts going, and it's fast, fast, fast. It's so wild. It's so wild. There's so much energy. It's so powerful. And then the song's over, and I just, you know, I was instantly in love. And so I think it was by the next day I bought this thing. Now, fortunately, the album is awesome. That's not, in my opinion, it's not even the best song on the album, and yet it is an incredible piece of music. It's so powerful. But especially, I mean, I must have played the first side of this album I don't know, just over and over and over. I loved this album. It was so cool. And it just has, and it's this German band, and it was just this powerful, aggressive, heavy metal music. And this would have been right around the time that Balls to the Wall came out. And I remember seeing that video and hearing that song, and that was like, that was such an unbelievable tune. So I bought that too. And then I bought the one after that. And I really grew to love these guys. But I don't think, even though I loved Balls to the Wall, I didn't love Metal Heart as much, even though it had some cool stuff on it. I still think of all the stuff that I ever bought from Accept, this still to me is like the best thing they ever did. It's so cool. So what I found is I'm doing research for this show to find things to talk about and cool little history things, and I was doing some looking around for things about Accept, and I found a couple of cool articles, and I'll make other videos where I share some of the others, but I'm just going to read one of them to you today. And this is from the Syracuse Herald Journal, and this is 1984. So this is actually after Balls to the Wall had come out. But these articles about Accept, the thing about them is they were this kind of, I don't know, tier 2 band. In other words, they never really reached the fame, obviously, you know, that a lot of other bands, like other German bands like the Scorpions, these guys never even came close to reaching what the Scorpions did, right? But they still, for a certain group of people, were a really, really important part of the history of what we know as heavy metal. You know, depending on who you talk to, a lot of people will look at that song Fast as a Shark and say, really, that was the world's introduction to real speed metal. And I don't know what I think about that for sure, but maybe I can get your comments on that, because I know a lot of people watching this video are going to know all about this stuff, and they're going to know about the history and kind of the influence that this band had on a lot of other people. That's kind of the interesting thing too, because there were so many groups back then, actually all throughout the history of rock and roll, where you'd have these bands that were these really, really important groups, and yet they never really reached the fame themselves. You know, a couple examples like that, like the New York Dolls and Diamond Head, yet they still influenced the people that really became famous. But anyway, this is a great band and an incredible, in my opinion, an incredible record, Restless and Wild. If you haven't heard it before, it's really, and you like heavy music. And it's cool because I can, unlike some of the stuff that I loved in the 80s, where I listen to it now and I go, this one's not like that to me. This was just had this, it was really honest, and it was powerful, and it was really cool. And, you know, I mentioned Udo Dirkschneider, and if you're watching this and not just listening to it, you can see on the screen right now the picture they have in this newspaper of the band. And over on the left is Udo Dirkschneider. And he was kind of an interesting character because I think the guy was, 5.5 feet tall, just this real short guy. And this just kind of a little tank. And yet he had this monster just sound that would come out of his mouth, and he's actually still around, and he still has a brutal voice. Udo's not singing with Accept anymore, but he's still putting things out. And then it says here the German band Accept from left to right, and it lists the band members. And the title of this article, and it's not very long, but again, if you're into this stuff, you'll probably enjoy just hearing this old stuff that comes from this. So this is April 30th, 1984, from the Syracuse Herald Journal. And the title is Accept Plays Heavy Metal, German band eager to open Ozzy Osbourne concert. Don't let the name fool you. The band with the gentle name of Accept is heavy metal music. And then, quote, I hate the name heavy metal, but it's a label everyone understands. It's hard to find the right definition. We used to say we did hard rock, but that doesn't fit now. If I could, I'd just say we do heavy music, said Wolf Hoffman, Accept's lead guitarist, in a telephone interview with Winnipeg, Manitoba. He sounded tired. The band had traveled all night on a bus from a concert in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Then he continues the quote, the band had the name Accept when I joined it in 1978. We kept it because it's come to mean an attitude of ours. We are open-minded, unquote. Accept is also the opening act for the Ozzy Osbourne concert Tuesday night at 8 in the Onondaga War Memorial. I don't know how to say that. Founded in 1977, that's the next subhead. The German group was founded in 1977 by singer and lyricist Udo Dirkschneider. After the first year, the band personnel stabilized, including Dirkschneider Hoffmann, Jörg Fischer on rhythm guitar, Peter Baltus on bass, and Stefan Kaufmann on drums. In 1982, Kaufmann left the group due to the pressures of touring and was replaced by Hermann Frank. Accept has recorded 5 albums. Accept in 1979, I'm a Rebel in 1980, Breaker in 1981, Restless and Wild, which is the one I was just talking about, in 1982, and their 1984 release, Balls to the Wall. Quote, Balls to the Wall has a furious theme. It's all about all the people in the world without freedom, people who are up against the wall. We are not a political band, though. People shouldn't take the theme of the album too seriously, unquote, said Hoffmann with an attractive German accent, only occasionally groping for a word. And we'll have to do a video on, a video on Balls to the Wall, because that song, I think the first time I ever heard that, I was at a concert in an old place called the Rainbow Music Hall in Denver, Colorado. It's a Walgreens now. And it was before some concert, and they had these big screens where they'd play music videos before the concert would start. And I remember that really cool guitar hook that it starts with. And then, it's Balls to the Wall is such a great tune, but the lyrics, they are really cool. And they are kind of this really cool, rebellious, all the oppressed people rising up. I still love that song. I still listen to it. It's on my rotation. It's a great tune. Okay. So, on and on and on. Let's see here. Quote, we felt that way in the first years of the band in Germany. We had a bad contract with a manager and we couldn't do anything about it. And Germany is different from America. There's not much to choose from. You need someone from the very beginning to perform. And the next subhead is attracts new audiences. In 1981, after the release of the album Breaker, Accept toured the United Kingdom with Judas Priest, a kind of breakthrough for the band. Accept attracted new audiences. Quote, we gained more serious experience on that tour, said Hoffmann, and we paid for it. In Europe, the opening act pays to perform. We lost a lot of money on that tour. Anyway, it's kind of an interesting thing that that would happen, that they'd actually have to pay. And that's not, by the way, this is not really uncommon. That kind of thing would happen in various places around. Just interesting to hear that they went through that period where they were paying to perform, to be the opening act for certain acts. Okay. After the release of Restless and Wild, Accept signed a long-term contract with Portrait Records in the United States and began an extensive tour of Europe. And actually this one here, you can, if you saw it up close, you'd see it's on Portrait Records. And this is, I think this was the American cover of the album. And there was another one that I thought was maybe cooler. The one that they had for Germany, it had a couple of guitars that were on fire on the cover. And it was, I don't know, it was kind of cool. Okay, let's see here. Portrait. With their album Balls to the Wall on the national top 200 selling LPs and tapes chart, and the band's video of the title cut receiving airplay on cable's music television, Accept begins its first American tour. Quote, I just found out we were coming to America 2 weeks ago, said Hoffmann. Never believe something like this is going to happen until the contract is signed. It is a dream for a German band to play in America. It's a great country. We feel like it's our country because people like us here. We have found the biggest audiences and always packed clubs, unquote. The next subhead is ready for US. He hesitated, then added, you can worry waiting for 5 years to come here. After the concert in Winnipeg, Accept will headline 2 shows in Montreal before coming to the United States. Accept has been critically compared with the German heavy metal band The Scorpions. The Scorpions, however, are not the only heavy metal music to come out of Germany. In the last 2, by the way, that's for sure. And matter of fact, one of the biggest bands in the world right now is a German band that you've probably heard of before. And be hard not to because they are so big. But they don't, where except actually their stuff's in English, just like the Scorpions. Rammstein is not. Everything that they sing is in German, and they're huge. And they're a German band, and I love Rammstein. I mean, they're just awesome. So, but anyway. And they also did a lot of, and they mentioned that here, in the last few years, a lot of bands trying to appeal to the industrial worker have started, said Hoffman, but I think they are more trendy with an electronic sound than the Scorpions or Accept. And Rammstein probably falls into that category a little bit too. Although Accept's video was staged at a demolition site just outside of London's Heathrow Airport and comes to a crashing finale with Dirk Schneider astride a huge demolition ball, the band is not a stereotypical group of wild musicians. And then here's the next quote. I think that is a worldwide prejudice about musicians. I hate it when bands are proud of being drunk or having so many groupies. We are a bit different. We're into different sports. On tour, we jog, swim, and take a sauna when we can, unquote. Maybe not your usual heavy metal band, but Accept with a love for saunas is genuinely German. And that's the end of the article. So I hope you enjoy this stuff. I like I said, Restless and Wild is such a great tune, or a great album, actually, and a great song too. And if you've never really listened to Accept and you want something, that's the one to get. Restless and Wild. It's so good. And I hope you enjoy these videos and reminiscing and thinking about some of this stuff again. Please, of course, follow this channel. Leave any feedback if you remember Accept, if you remember this band, and what was your introduction to them? Because this was like I think it was their fourth album. And the music they put out before this was pretty heavy stuff too, but it didn't really compare to this. And even one of their early kind of hits, if you want to call it that, like I'm a Rebel, it still had it was heavy metal in a sense, but it was kind of poppy a little bit too. It kind of a sing-along kind of thing. And this just was different. And I loved this album. And I'd love to, if you had this, I'd really like to know what your first experience hearing this was like. What was your first experience hearing Restless and Wild? Because it was, for me, it was such a big deal. It was like a weird little turning point in my life that I remember the moment that it happened. Anyway, please follow the channel. Share this video with friends, because if you like this stuff, I'm certain you know somebody else that does too. Like the video and also leave your comments in the comment area below. And with that, have yourself a fantastic day.